probably thinking, holy mackerel, you got the whole wing built in 2 minutes. Now, sad to say, it takes a little more than 2 minutes to build a wing. But I want to make mention of something that I think is real significant before we go into this video. There's an awful lot of good ways to build a nobler wing, which include, and I would not make any list of how I prioritize them, but certainly you can build on rods, you can put rod holes in, you can use an adjusto jig, you can build it flat on the table with the tips up. Any way that you can get the wing to sit parallel to a flat table will be a fine way. Now we're going to try a way that I've never videotaped before. I've built some this way, but I've never videotaped it. I'm using a bunch of little wood blocks to hold the wing in position. Now Harold Price showed me this way back in the days when he built the first Valkyrie. I watched him do this and I said, hey, that's a great way to do it. And what he did, he had a picture framing shop and he used all his scrap wood up to cut blocks that were exactly the same thickness. And that made for a very efficient, very nice little jig. Now some of the other ways that we've already videotaped, the lost foam method we did in 1993, 1994. Bob Hunt has excellent videos on how to do it using that method. He even makes wings that way, which you probably might want to check that video out too. But we're not going to be bothering with lost foam, we're going to be bothering with scrap wood. And this way is a good way to use up all your old scrap wood. That's the key here, is don't go out and buy some brand new wood. Use up all your scrap. And we're going to go outside and start cutting some up in about 5 minutes. Now, the only deviation I really want to make from the kit is I want to make the tips out of blocks. The reason I like to make the tips out of blocks, and you can see we're just taking a second or two off one of my previous videos. I think this is Tsunami here. One of the reasons is we have a very good method that's worked well for us. It's certainly not the only method. Just like building a wing, there's several methods, and you should try all of them. Build an I-beamer, build a D-tube, build a foam wing, decide what's right for you. Decide if you like the lost foam method, the rod method, single rod, double rod, but try them all at least once. And I always, in particular, I like the look of the block tips. I remember Jerry Sipler's plane, just to use an example, had the beautifully carved and finished block tips. And I've tried to use those on all the planes that I've built over the last, I don't know, too many years to remember. But that's probably going to be our only deviation from what the kit would call for. Now the plans basically split the wing into two pieces. So what we're going to do, the first thing is we want to make the cut. I'm going to cut this out with a pair of scissors. Attach it with some tape here so that we have one wing plan form, all in one piece, and we're going to use that as a reference in building the wing. Okay, we don't need the wing tips, we don't need the flaps, so just slice it up that way. And then we'll join it at that joint. Now when you do this, it's a good idea to use that straight ruler, because we want to have a perfectly straight hinge line. I want to have a kink in that hinge line. Put the tape right in the middle, not where the joint will be, not over the spur. It's going to be up off the table for the whole time, but this will get us
over and tape it back anyway.
Okay, get a piece in there.
No, it's okay.
And then you can trim the whole rest, so all we have is the part of the ring that we're going to build. By using two rulers, you can help hold it down so you get a nice straight joint.
Check and make sure that our table's level. It wasn't a few minutes ago, and we had to take some shims that worked a few weeks ago out from under it.
It's a constantly ongoing thing to keep a table level, and these are high humidity conditions, that's for sure.
And we're within a fraction.
Okay. And if all else fails and you don't have a straight ruler, do this. Just sight down the table. Your eye will work pretty well. Yeah, it looks like it'll be fine. So all we don't need the flaps, we don't need the tips. We just need that main section of the ring, because that's what we're going to be building off.
I'm trying to be careful to cut this, leaving the ink line on, but that's all.
Yeah, because we want the wood blocks to be close to that. I just use an old rubber cement to just tack this right to the table. So we know the table's relatively flat, and this will allow us to pull the plan up, move it. Ordinary high-tech cement, rubber cement. Buy it in any stationery store. Now, what that allows us to do, if you use contact cement, it's difficult to get it up. Real contact cement, like 3M cement, rubber cement is nice. It'll hold it down. Press down, make sure you don't have any wrinkles in it. Even though we're going to be building above this, it's nice to have a nice flat area to work with. And check that we have a true edge. That's real important. Yeah, let me hold that for you. Just true that edge. So now I have the plan attached right to the table.
And you can see in places we were that far out. Okay, now we have a true edge.
The approved material, John Brodak rubber cement.
Thanks, John.
Okay, what Ken is going to do is get a center line down each rib. Now we want to build this. You could build this wing off the table really in any dimension. You could make the blocks 1 foot, 2 feet, 3 feet. But let's pretend, I just did this for a demonstration, that this is the table. What we're trying to accomplish is to have the wing that all the center lines are parallel to the table. None of them are like that, none of them are like that. So by looking at this, 1 inch would be the minimum we could use. And we can use up all our scrap balsa. Anytime you have some rock hard balsa or something you don't want to put on your plane, save it for these kind of things or for sanding blocks. 1 inch will do it.
1 inch gives us plenty of room.
Now what I'll do, I'll set up we have a little baby Craftsman table saw. I'll set the blade up for a 1 inch cut, and we'll just make a bunch of 1 inch blocks. We could do that outside just to keep the dust down.
Okay, while you're setting up the saw, I'll center line.
Okay, while Kenny's center lining all the ribs, you have a rip fence. And I want to make mention that this saw is a piece of STEM history. This was given to me by Don Patterson's father before he passed away. And God bless him, we have used it to make motor mounts and make all kind of things. And I want that dimension to be a little bit over 1 inch so that all my blocks will be exactly the same. By the way, just a point of interest, if you do your own gardening, and Karen and I are very involved in gardening, balsa sawdust makes a great soil conditioner. Never throw it away, put it right in your garden, mulch it right in. What I do is take what Ken has already done and make sure all the blocks are exactly the same size and put a mark on one side. And then run a straight edge over the top of the blocks just to make sure they're all exactly the same size. I guess you have some more ribs to center line up there?
Yeah, a few more to do.
Okay, just lay these all together, and if you lay a straight line on them, I mean, you take a ruler, you should be able to sight right down them, because that is going to determine what your wing is. This is a little gauge. Let me show this, Ken. That Bob Martens made. In fact, this is funny, not for loan. And by loosening this screw, you can raise the blade up and down, but we've got it locked in. And what we're doing is just double checking each one. Put it up there to make sure that each one of our points are on the center. Point to point, put a red mark, you know that one's been checked. And that's about all we're going to do today, is get the gauge ready. Tomorrow's a new day. There's a lot of good ways to build a wing. There may even be better ones than this. I'm sure there are better ones than this. But this one is real inexpensive. There's almost nobody I know that doesn't have a bunch of scrap wood. If you didn't, another way you could do this, if you really were in a pinch, you could just go get anything that was a constant height and glue the pins to it. And if you could find, go to a store and buy square pieces of 1 inch, precision cut lumber, As long as they all match up to the gauge, you're in good shape. Another thing I had thought of doing years ago, but I didn't do it, I was going to make blocks like this with X-Acto knives, number 11 blades glued to them, just so it would be a little, I don't know, you just shove it into the edge of the ring. And I guess you can figure out ahead of time what we're going to be doing is placing these all around the ring, tack gluing them to the table, and suspending the ring so that the whole ring is basically on center. And then when we pull them out and we turn the ring over, we can refixture it and do the sheeting on the other side. But again, never think there's only one way to do it. The lost foam way worked well on Tsunami. I mean, worked well on plenty of other people's planes. The rod method. The Cardinal kit with one rod, that method works great. Basically, a takeoff on this. What this allows you to do, and why this is a good choice for this plane, if we were going to cut 3/8" rod holes in these ribs, you see there's not much material left. They get very flimsy. These ribs are also 16, not 3/32, so based on that, this is the choice we've made, and hey, starting tomorrow, we're going to try to crank out a wing. This is the end of the 4th day of the Great American Nobler Project.
And we're sailing.
The Great American Nobler in. Okay, day 5 dawns on the Great Nobler Building Project. First thing, I laid out the trailing edge. Now what I did, I made a decision here, and it's basically for cosmetic reasons. I didn't want to join 2 pieces of wood and have the joint here, even though that's the way it should be. And I did have a real nice piece of 3/32 48" wood. So I took that piece of 48" wood, and it was basically just to replace that I don't have a joint in the upper surface. We've been considering maybe doing this with a clear finish on the wing, and I didn't want to see that joint. That was really the only reason. It's for cosmetic reasons. So step 1 is I tape this down to the table just to hold it in place. Make sure this edge is perfectly straight. Check it with a ruler. We got the 48" ruler here. Lay that out there and let's just make sure we're starting with a nice straight edge on the bottom piece. Okay, next step is we want to take the ring spar, make the ring spar. We're going to do this just like the directions say, with one little kink. We're going to cut it out using a ruler, cut the pattern out that they give you in the kit, and we're going to rubber cement that right to the piece of wood, and then do all the cutting with the piece rubber cemented right in place. That'll make it just a little bit easier. The part won't be moving around. Now, I just want to make mention for one thing. I've gone through the book here. The way that they show you in the book is certainly a doable way, and certainly I think it may even be easier than doing it our way. I don't really know. But the way that we're doing it, I think is going to be an alternative way. And I've gone through here to try to combine the best of all worlds. What we're trying to do is give you 2 or 3 choices for each one of these operations. Now, the way that he does it in the instruction sheet, I think is a real good way to do it. I want to emphasize over and over again that there's more than one way to do this stuff. You can do it with pins, you can do it with CA, with glue, with little wood blocks. You can do cut holes for the rods. You can do a million different ways. You can even get Bob Hunt to cut a lost foam wing core for you. There's a lot of different ways to do this. But I think the way that we're doing is, for us anyway, because we're familiar with doing it this way, is another way you should consider. And you should also, if this way appeals to you, try it this way. But if you have a problem with either way, you have the alternative second choice. And that's the best of all worlds. Make up the spar. See, the kit is marked with the word spar. That's a real nice hard piece of wood to use. So that's what you want to cut the spars with. Okay, good idea to use a straight edge. Use a straight edge. Do the trimming of those templates and spars. That's a real hard piece of wood, and it's a good idea to score the wood first. Score it, go back 2 or 3 times. Don't try to cut it in one time, or else the knife tends to catch in the grain. Okay, cutting the slots. A nice new blade and a Dremel saw cuts them right through. Okay, you got that pretty well laid out. Now, nothing has been glued yet. Everything is in with these little, we got these from John Pothier, by the way, these nice little razor sharp pins, which they're real nice when you get one under your fingernail. Ken's gotten a couple of them. For his nose or something.
For you viewers out here, when you cut your spar, what I did, I cut the spar and I left the pencil line on when I made the splits for the ribs. It'll work a little better. Take the pencil line off so that the ribs hang a little looser on the spar. Hot little tip.
Oh, you glued the middle of the spar. That's the only thing so far. Okay.
That's the only thing that's glued, and I did that because I wanted to get the dimensions right for the ribs, and it's close, very, very close.
But basically, this is just sitting here. There's nothing glued to nothing right now. You can't say nothing to nothing, but you can't now. Just to show, this is all just jigged in. The fits are all nice and tight. Everything looks nice and, I don't know, it looks pretty good to me.
And that's the way it came out of the box. So.
Okay, and that's an out-of-the-box deal. I would say that took you an hour to get it to that point, roughly. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Basically, you can start any way you want. The trailing edge is a perfectly flat surface. There's no taper to it. For all realistic purposes, the trailing edge is flat. So by gluing one rib at a time, kick it off or let it kick. By the way, a better way, now we didn't do this, but a better way to do this is, when you lay this piece of wood on a table, light sand it with some sandpaper and leave the dust on. Then when you hold this in place, the dust will kick that off at a nice slow rate. You'll get a little bit nicer of a joint. Okay, now, it's not a big deal. Just go 1, 2, 3, right down the line one way or the other. And what we're going to do is get the top half of the trailing edge on. Get the square piece put on the edge. So the trailing edge will be finished while the front of this wing is still, we can move the front. Then we're going to jack it up, put the leading edge on. And the last thing, absolutely last, just run some beads of glue down there on the spar. And this way is just one way of many ways, but this way I'd be willing to bet even a rank beginner can get a pretty decent wing out of this. And what I'm hoping is, this is a wing, by the way, it's pretty generic that John uses on his Warbird kits, and I hope soon to be Profile Cardinal. One of the projects we discussed maybe doing in the near future is a Profile Cardinal using this type of wing with Profile and the Brodak 40 engine. That may be something that's coming real soon, in fact. Yeah, that's looking good. I think this way, I don't see how this could be a problem, even for a very low skill level model. I think you could just put this wing together as quick as can be.
A hot little tip. These are really nice pins because sometimes... and they come out clean.
Yeah, these came from John. See, I always give credit to the person who turns me on to something. Now, these came from John Pothier. John Pothier is an expert level modeler who came up with these little pins on it. They may be available commercially, and I don't know it. But you just twist them and pull them out. As opposed to these big, these are the guys I'm used to working with, and you get one of these under your fingernail and it's a problem. But always. And there's a point there. If you come up with a nice little tip or building idea, pass it on to other people. Write it up in Stunt News or write it up in Model Aviation or whatever. Little tips like that can just make it a lot more fun. You can see how quick this is going. Now, once they're all pegged in, you just go right down the other side, one by one by one. Just like spiking railroad tracks in HO. Just spike them right in. And no matter what wood you use, it's always a good idea to take the nice straight edge and get a nice straight edge on this. Even though we've cut this wood, it still doesn't have a perfectly straight edge. No wood that's cut commercially is really perfect. And you can put a straight edge on, which will give you a nice, especially the edge that's going to be on the trailing edge. Just take the nice 48-inch ruler, get a nice new X-Acto or an XL blade.
We did get a little...
Looks good now?
That's the way it ought to be.
Okay.
Both sides.
Well, it could have something to do with the rain last night. It rained last night. It was true last night when we left, and it's not true now. So, okay. We did. We made some little blocks that were they're just here temporarily, so it'll line up the trailing edge when we drop it in. You can take some slow drying CA. Just put a couple of drops on each side.
Can't waste any time.
Yeah, this is one, if you have a friend, this is a good time. We don't have any friends, so it makes it easy for us. Get them to come over and help you put the trailing edge on. Otherwise, you really won't get enough glue in these joints, and we want to take this back to the edge of the table and get it block sanded before we put that last little cap on.
Okay.
All right.
Comes trailing edge.
Now it just lines up with the blocks. The blocks are in place. I'll give you a hand holding this down. Another trick, and we forgot it already, that would have been a good trick for doing this, is take the side that's going toward the glue and just put some sanding dust on it. Just hit it lightly with some 400 sandpaper. Leave the dust on. The dust helps kick off the glue. But even if you have to do it alone, it's still reasonable to do it.
Okay, now that's kicked off.
It's kicked off? Okay, let it sit for a minute anyway before you go to the next step.
But it already looks like a real primo wing. We got a real straight wing going here.
This unsolicited testimony. You'll have a trim tab the size of a beer can on this thing.
Yeah, I'll be able to read.
First flight, it's coming in heavy, it's coming in heavy.
I'll be able to read my AMA number.
Now the wing at this point is real delicate. Nothing is glued except the trailing edge. We're just trying to get a nice firm line on the back so we can glue that 1/4 inch post in. And get it stiff enough you can hold it up. A well-engineered wing. I'll give you full credit, Ken.
I'm a genius.
Well, you may want to tack glue this on. What we're trying is just tack gluing it on everywhere there's a pin, and then sight it before you really run a glue seam down the whole trailing edge. Easier to pin it on both sides, because everything is still flexible here. Everything is totally, we could almost take the wing apart right now. But we want to get it all lined up with those blocks with the pins, and then when you glue the spar in, and then we can run permanent glue joints on everything, that should lock it in, and the sheeting puts the final lock on it.
Keeping your heart unfeeling when some heart you're stealing. Do you ever?
The easiest way is just tack it right about where each pin is first, because we want to sight down that before you run a glue seam. Then you can run the glue seam just by holding the wing up toward the table and dropping the glue right in. So before we actually put this wing on a jig, that whole trailing edge can be glued. Now if it isn't straight, obviously bend it in that position. Hold it down to the table any way you can to get it straight.
Cook to order.
What a banana.
Very close.
Okay. You done well, son. Not that good. Now don't break it now while you have it up in midair.
438-9677.
Now one of the things you might notice that we did, rather than using an 1/8 inch cap, we're using a 1/4 inch cap. In the old days when they used cloth hinges, an 1/8 inch was plenty good. What we're doing, when we put really nylon hinges in, 1/8 of an inch is not enough material, so we extended this into a piece of 1/4 inch just so we had some more material to put it. I'm sure it won't change the design radically, but it'll give us a little more material to get the hinges glued into. Those places where you'd really like to have a helper. Okay, now you can just run the back of the bead.
I have a helper, please.
Camera boy.
Camera.
Okay. And if you want to, in the middle of doing say every 5 of them, pick it up and make sure you haven't built any kind of a little wriggle into it. But I don't think that's going to twist. I think that's pretty well set on a straight and narrow. So you're going to take, what Ken's going to do is he's going to take the completed fuselage to the Circle Burner Club meeting tonight, and he's going to hit Rich Peabody right on the head with the fuselage. That's basically all we're going to get done for this session, but it's nice to know we've gotten this far, and for sure Monday, this wing, he's going to sand away. Don't forget to bring that cowl Monday.
Right.
Okay, and we'll be in Fat City. Good session.
Lettering and call Chiyoda.
You make a list of what you got to do. Now this morning, I guess you can see we're in the middle of a rainstorm, so we're not going to be able to do a lot of workouts. We're not going to be able to do anything outside. So, well, as soon as Ken gets here, I'm trying to set up the table. But this is the kind of thing you have to deal with on the East Coast. One day it's sunny and beautiful, the next day it's in the middle of a storm. Okay, do you have enough coffee to be awake yet this morning, or?
Yeah, just about enough for these pins.
You're going to put some of these, you'll have a few of them through your finger before the day's over. Okay, what Ken is doing is just trying to line up the leading edge. Obviously, the next step, we want to get this kind of up on the table and ready to start putting the sheeting on. Oh, you got them both set up.
Yeah.
Okay, Kenny did a little mock-up, laid it all out. Looks like everything's going to be very easy to do. But the first thing we want to do now is make sure that we have a taper, that the taper and the trailing edge is equal. If the taper is higher or lower on one side, the center line that we put will not be in the middle. And we need that center line when we put the pins and the blocks in the wing. What he did, he laid a piece of 1/4-inch tape out just as a little, so they'll have the thickness of tape and extra wood there. Remember that we extended the trailing edge here from 1/8 to 1/4 because we're going to use plastic hinges. Now, if you were going to use cloth hinges, you know, common sense would tell you you don't need that 1/4-inch piece there. So what Kenny did over the weekend is he put on, how many, 2 or 3 coats of CA over the whole cowl. I've been sanding them off, trying to get a nice finish, because while he's working on that, I want to try to box this up and make a rubber mold for the cowls so that we'll have an accessory item for people that are not into carving and sanding and all this stuff. They'll be able to purchase right from John a fiberglass cowl, even as an accessory.
Couple of little things when you CA your cowl. It's a real good way to do it. What I did, and what seems to work best, is use your oldest CA, like the thin stuff that's going bad, or even your medium that's going bad. Spread a pool of it on the piece of work. Grab a paper towel, rub it in and smooth it so it's nice and even. Then take your accelerator bottle, hold it about 2 feet away, and just mist it very gently. And what you'll find is that it goes off very evenly and smoothly. If you get too close and squirt it, you have popcorn and you have 20 minutes worth of sanding to fix it. Great way to finish your cowl. I have to get back to work on the trailing edge.
Yeah, you get that. I like to get that done as the priority, and the time we're using in between, I'm gonna try to box up that mold. Now, I'm not going to put a lot of the molding stuff onto the tape. If you really are interested in making a fiberglass cowl, there's been a great article in Stunt News, and I've got plenty of video of my own showing how I've done maybe about 8 or 10 different ones, Midgley's cowl and everything. But it's just nice to know that if somebody did want to have that, especially an advanced level guy that wasn't interested in spending the 2 or 3 days it usually takes to carve the cow, this will get them in the air a lot faster. These are some of our old cowling molds. Fiberglass cowlings are just like foam wings. They're an improved way, a modern way of making things real quick and repeatable without all of the handiwork that goes into it. So that's just one of the things we'd like to have as an accessory. Somewhere down the road that you'd be able to get, and we don't have a sample yet, we'd be able to have these component parts for the people that really want to get their plane in the air in a hurry. Now all of these planes up here have fiberglass cowlings. They've all withstood the test of time, so I have no reason to think that the Nobler will be any different. You know, once you get the tape off, you can put the final little sanding in with some nice fine paper. You should have a perfect taper to that. Feel it. Best way to check for that taper, feel it with your finger, and then get a center line on. Tip to tip with a straight edge. You use a straight edge or use that method by using your finger. Either one is fine, but make sure that it's right in the middle. If that center line is high or low, the flaps are not going to be in the center of the wing. They're going to be off center. Now what Kenny's got, he's got everything tack glued down. All these little blocks, just a couple drops of CA. You want to run your finger across here and see if they're high or low, because this is still floating. Now this one's a little high, so you can just pick that up just a tad. And in effect, you're lowering the spar, not picking up. Now what this tells you, if the kit is cut correctly, and this one is, for all purposes, perfect, you should be able to rub your hand right across there. And once you can, and you've got this all locked in, you've got it locked in from this side, let me see the front, you've got this locked in, that with this height off the table, height off the table, height off the table, you've got a center line on the back, we're using a point here for the center line, and this is all flat. Now you can run a nice bead of thin CA on each one of these joints, all 4 sides. So in effect, you lock it in, and then run some glue up in the leading edge, so that this is now hopefully locked in before we put the sheeting on. You go on all 4 sides of that, so you get a good strong joint. And the worst thing you can do now is when you're putting the sheeting on, is put a lot of pressure on. That's what Mike Kajeski did on his wing. It was perfect until he sheeted the one side. And just go on all 4 corners, and that should lock it right in. Okay, this is just a rough box for the mold that we've made, and I'm going to do this off camera, but just to get a look at what that looks like with the plug in there. Okay, now what you want to do, the wood isn't attached in any way, just lay it in position. Using a T-square, this will give you a nice smooth joint here. And just trace that out. Sometimes you can just wrap this around. You can just let it roll over. Not ultra critical, but you sure don't want to have that joint on a 20-degree angle. Okay, now when that's done, then you're going to use this piece to measure up the other piece. Do you know what I'm saying? I always like to make this joint first, and then trim what's left over on the outside of the wing. The reason I don't want to trim this off yet is if I have to recut, I don't want to have this wood walking its way in. And the kit leaves plenty of extra wood, so you don't have to worry about a 1/16 of an inch or something.
We have all of our leading edge sheeting is angled to the correct angle for the center section, and it's cut down to be just somewhat longer than the end of the wing. We don't want it getting in the way. We lay it here on our leading edge, and we can see that the sheeting is not dead straight. So we're going to true this edge, take the bare minimum off.
Because what the deal is we do have a true edge on the leading edge, and if you have this sheeting and you start pulling it out this way and it's bowing, you start to bend the twist into the wing. So you'd like to, in an all-perfect world, start with an edge that you can run a 48-inch ruler on, and also a straight edge on the sheeting, and then marry the 2 of them up. That gives you a nice straight, you're not building a twist or building something crazy into the wing that way. You know, what we did is, and it's an old, I guess old technology, as if you were using alphatic or inboard, pin the whole leading edge in and make sure that that edge is perfectly straight. And then what Ken did is from the back, he's gluing it from the back, and while you're gluing it, kind of hold that down so that you have a nice tight seam up in the front when we go to radius it off. You don't want to pull that down until you have the glue seam nice and straight. And all during the operation, try not to press down any harder than you have to on the wing. And just take all the pins out. That should be all set.
Yeah, we're home free.
So taking a little tight bond alphatic resin and just getting in on each one of the rib tops, not the spar, just the rib tops. And just the slightest little bit. Because what this does, it locks it in. If you leave this step out, you're not really locking the wing together.
This is another one of those jobs where there's a lot of ways to do it. This is a good way.
This gives you plenty of working time. You're not under the gun to try to get it right on the first shot. If it isn't right, you can move it around. So you can hold it down before the alphatic kicks and just see there's a nice glue right on there. And that President Nixon is calling. Now my suggestion is always tack glue it at each rib. What Ken's doing is using a block of wood to just bend the sheeting back down. The reason for that is if you don't do it that way, you build a twist into the wing. You're forcing it to go down. In fact, we had this bottle up here. You're using some weights just to hold it down. Tack each piece. Then you can make sure you don't have a ripple or a warp or anything. And if it sights out nice, then you can run the glue seam right down.
Atlantic Avenue and in Jersey, see them at the Newport.
Now sight it down, Ken. Make sure you don't have any kind of funny ripple in there.
4th of July fireworks for tonight. Don't worry about it. They are on. They will begin at 9.
Now you can just run the whole glue seam. Always good to tack things first. Make sure they're straight before you pull the permanent glue joint, because if you had to pull the sheet off, and all you have to do is break it at the ribs instead of pulling that whole joint apart. And in effect, if you twisted that, you could pretty much throw the wing away. Just put a little sheet under here. And the purpose of having that little sheet under there is so that you have a jointed glue to it. It's not just a butt joint. You have a little tongue and groove joint then. Just any small little 16th piece, and you want the grain going this way. Tack it first, make sure it's straight. This gives you a nice strong center joint. It's especially helpful when, so you can get your finger in there now, but when you put the other side on, you can't get your finger in, so it's real helpful to have that. That in place, do the same thing with the straight edge, and dry fit the joint. And if you need to use a sanding block to it, but you want to have a nice straight joint in there. And you also want to have a nice straight leading edge, and what we'll do is just repeat all the steps we did here, just repeat them on the other side.
Entering at song number 44 on the PLJ 4th of July Top 300 of all.
So make sure you get all of them.
Every one? Every single one?
You'll find out what happens if you don't get it. You got the bell crank mount all punched out already?
Yeah.
All right, let me get that set up. Sight the trailing edge. Sight the leading edge. It's one of the things I like to do is while the wing is in this position, I like to get the cap strips in. But what it does then, before we turn the wing over and mount the bell crank and do the center sheeting, it stiffens up the whole wing. It makes it a little more durable just to handle it, move it around and shim it and whatever. I think it's a good investment, so we'll take, you got the cap strip?
Yeah.
Take 10 minutes here and just run right through with the cap strips. What we're trying to accomplish is to get the wing locked into position as soon as possible, so that while we're doing other things, we don't wind up having a problem where it's bending one way, bending the other way. And the cap strips definitely help lock it in. And what you can also do is, did you get a bead of CA on here? Not yet. Okay, one of the things you can do is take the slow drying CA, put a bead on there, then do the top and bottom with the fast and just hold it till it kicks. We got that slow drying CA there. Always make them just a little bit oversized so they kind of spring into position. They pop into position. If you have to hold it in position, it's probably too short. Just use it for the next rib out on the wing. Now, that looks a little on the big side, so hit it with a sanding block 1 or 2 times. As long as you can spring them in place, now you can take that slow CA, just an easier way of doing it instead of drooling all the fin down the rib. Put a little bead on the top. You have the slow stuff, because that'll take 30 seconds to kick. Then you can hold the corners in and then just do them with the thumb. Now just make sure you hold it in position, yes, that's so it doesn't dry in a bowed position. Needless to say, it's just a question of redundantly doing it over and over and over and over. Okay, a couple more to go. We'll have all the cap strips on. Okay, now one of the things we're going to do is we're just going to make a replacement of the 4-inch belt, the 3-inch belt crank with a 4-inch belt crank. These are the ones that John Brodak sells. They even look the same. If you didn't measure it, you probably wouldn't know. But we do like the heavy-duty relationship of the handle ratio to this. Now, let me just mention a thing. Most of the flying we do here is in some really rough, windy, turbulent air, and that's where this really comes into play. If all you ever do is fly it on a runway or where the air is open, this might not even be necessary, but for sure this is something you want to do if you're going to have it and you're going to fly in some rough air. Belt crank now is an 1/8-inch piece of plywood, and it says in the directions that it can be drilled with lightning holes. Now what I'm trying to do is use tape to lay out, so in effect we have 3/8-inch bars around and 3/8-inch areas where it's going to be hitting the ribs. And I put a taper on the front of this to try to lighten it up. Now I can use a hole template to get all the edges radius the same radius. And this allows you to get nice radiused corners with the Dremel tool and not have a stress riser. So in effect what we're trying to do is make a part that's every bit as strong as a solid piece of plywood. The one thing you wouldn't want to have is 90-degree corners. Or you wouldn't want to just take a drill and just make Swiss cheese out of this. You'd have nothing but stress risers. This I think is the most reasonable way to do this. Now we got this all laid out. I'm going to go over to the saw. I'll do this off camera. Just cut all the lightning holes, Dremel it all out, and then I'll send John Brodak a template of how I did this in case he wants to put that on some future set of plans or updates or whatever. But you really just don't want to go and start drilling holes randomly. This is probably a reasonable way to do it. Okay, all the cap strips are in. Hey,
Yep.
a nice watershed.
Made a mess of the workbench.
Okay, that's ready to mount the belt crank.
Oh, we're going to be trying to take some of the play out of this bell crank. It's
to use this kind of an assembly, you had better have the top to bottom clearance. If it's too tight, it's not really going to ever wear in, and if it's too loose, well, you're going to have slop that you don't really want.
a little bit of play in that.
So Ken is trying to zero this in.
Take just a little bit more out.
And it's still a little tight too. Well, just keep file on till you have. You want it to be totally free moving, but not that it rocks side to side any more than necessary. Now, obviously, one of the most important things in any stuntship is having nice, free, and easy controls. And if this is binding, not gonna work.
Slowly, but
yeah, take a little more. Take a little more. Just did a little dry fit of this. One of the things we're going to do, even though the plan shows to mount it this way, we want to mount it this way because what's going to happen, the way this works, when you have a bell crank that is not supported on the top, it wants to do this. It wants to pull up. And this gives us a lot more leverage than if we mounted it this way. And what Ken's doing is just cutting a little hole. We don't know how much material yet we need to take away so that we get the full swing of the bell crank. You need to break this piece of this rib array to slide that piece in, and I made all these little notches in here. Number one, I don't want the plate to be up, I don't want it to be down, I don't want it to be sideways. I'd like it to fit right up against the spar, and I'll put some little braces on the bottom. Now you want to do what we're doing here is what I call a dry fit. You want that to fit in there.
There we go. Just fit.
Make sure you don't have anything binding on it, and we'll pull that out and put the lead outs and push rod on.
No, that's pretty good. We'll have to make up some braces.
Yeah, we also soldered the nut on the bottom. I didn't use glue. I wanted Stabrite silver solder, and then deflux it with baking soda and water. I just feel a lot better having some solder on that than some glue. Now, any soldering I ever do on any plane ever is Stabrite silver solder. It's a silver bearing solder. It's 4% silver. It melts at 411 degrees. It doesn't usually, unless you hold the soldering iron on the metal part, it's real good to use around nylon bell cranks. It doesn't get so hot that it melts the plastic. And make sure your gun is good and hot enough. A dot of that. And by the way, this is sulfuric acid. Don't get it in your face or in your eyes or anything. You'll know a good soldering joint when it's good and shiny, smooth. Now, we're not going to use braided lead outs. In our case, I'm much more comfortable with wire lead outs. And again, you have two ways to do it. You can do it the way you can mount the bell crank and use a 3-inch bell crank, do everything it shows on the plans. There won't be any problem. We're just trying to make this plane as heavy duty as we can for flying in the conditions that the circle burners always seem to have to fly in.
Which is bad.
Now what I have here, this is baking soda and water, just mixed together, just make a soup out of it. And that's the defluxing agent. Anytime you do a Stabrite solder joint, just paint a little bit of that on, wipe it off. That defluxes the joint. You forget to do that, the sulfuric acid in there ultimately eats the wire away, and it's a problem.
Don't get this flux on the plastic.
Oh yeah, another thing I forgot to mention.
You'll go into your plane later and you'll find it all eaten up.
Yeah, sulfuric acid is the reason. Notice another thing, I didn't put the bend right up on the wire. I have a nice big swooping bend, not a big kink going around a corner. If you make it tight around here, What the wire is always trying to do is this. Every time you pull on it, it'll pull test the plane. A nice long swooping bend. And just clean them up real good. You can do it to make up the push rod.
We're starting to make up the second half of our control system. We want to make the wire that goes from the bell crank to the flap. This is the piece of stock that came in our kit. Let's measure this with a mic. And it's 0.7...
It's really 0.75 wire.
Yeah. Oh, it's a little on the large side of 0.75.
Now, because we're making controls heavy duty, I decided, and I'll take full credit for this, we're going to use 0.93, which is 3/32 wire, as a little bit of a beef up.
Here, you can see the difference.
Well, I think if you're flying in New Jersey conditions at the Circle Burner Field, 0.93 is a good investment. Okay, Mr. Bend. Now the trick is bend it once and never bend it back. Yep, that broke. Wait.
Not the pliers.
Oh, you jumped off. Well, what I'm saying is if you bend it and it's too far, go get another piece of wire or cut that off. If you bend it and bend it back, bend it back, bend it. But the fourth time you do that, it's going to fracture the wire.
Okay.
Now this radius in here should never be a razor sharp radius. It should have a little bit of a radius to it. Important stuff.
I'm going to give this one more tweak and forget it.
And never go back and bend it over and over and over and over.
Okay,
it's just less than 90 degrees. And if you bend it and it's wrong, again, this is so important. Never just bend it back, bend it back. Make a whole new piece. Super important.
Cost you 3 cents to make a new part.
Okay, again, now we used an 0.93 push rod. I took a copper washer with a tight fit, Stabrite silver solder, both joints and the lead outs. Make sure we have a good, nice tight fit on everything. And I'll put a drop of that chain lube, the motorcycle chain lube on these, and get everything nice and flowing nice and easy. And then we're ready to snake this into the wing and hopefully maybe even get it flipped over today. Okay, now a lot of times, and we've done it, is we've got one rib, the top piece out, and Ken is just fishing through with his fingers and snaking the front lead out through as we work that piece in, and then we want to get it set in place. Now one of the advantages of doing it this way is you have a straight rod. A push rod of any kind should have no bends in it. It should be perfectly straight when it's in its most efficient mode. Any bend that's in there, when you put a load on it, it's going to do that. So this gives us a little bit of an improvement control-wise, and it doesn't distort the whole concept of doing the plane, to make it nostalgic. It just gives us a nice, heavy-duty, and basically, there's a reality here. The difference between planes from 30 years ago or 40 years ago and modern planes is basically the biggest improvement I've seen is in the heavy-duty controls. And you can bet your bippy, and this is the truth. Years ago, I was one of the first ones. Well, the sweeper had a 6-inch bell crank. I had 4-inch bell cranks in the late 70s and early 80s. You can bet your life, not many of the big planes flying nowadays have anything but heavy-duty controls in them. Now again, if you're just sport flying and it isn't really important to have heavy-duty controls, or if the wind starts blowing and you're going to go home anyway, none of this will matter. But in this case, we expect nothing but severe heavy-duty use in this plane, and we're trying to beef up things that might be not to our advantage when we get up to the Circle Burner Field on a windy day, or Flushing, or Middlesex. All of these places tend to have really turbulent, windy, gusty conditions, and the heavy-duty controls make flying in that. Power steering is the only word that makes sense. Okay, you got them both through?
Yeah. Feels real good.
It's all nice and loose like this. You want to just tack it in, and you want it to be straight this way. Get a nice firm glue joint up along the spar. In fact, we'll even put a little triangle stock in there to firm it up. Then I want to look from the wingtip in and make sure this isn't tilted up or down. I want to have it straight in that plane. And I want to make sure everything has plenty of clearance around where the wires are coming through. And if we need to remove a little material, we certainly will. No problem at all. Get it tacked in first and then finalize it. Ken stripped off some triangle stock. And we want to get some bracing right along here. We cut out the rib in the back to allow to make sure we have plenty of travel. We are using the hole closest to the bell crank bolt. That gives you the most travel at the handle. And we need to just tack this guy back in too, Ken. When you're going to pull this rib apart, never cut it. Just rip it, break it, because now the joint will be a lot easier to glue back in. Hello to John Brodak.
Hello.
Merry night, Al Knight.
Hey, John.
John, we hate your Noblers. Okay, now all these little triangles, what these are here to do is, these will hold us in position, because one of the next steps, we're going to sheet the middle of the ring and then flip it completely over and rejig it. Okay, whenever you're ready there, Gonzo. You got the wood cut? I thought you cut this already.
We got wood.
All right, well, fit it in there.
Same one, yeah.
Leave it a little bit oversized because we want to put those little radiuses in, just like we did on the tail. Now, if you have never done this before, here's a good way to do this. Okay, press this up till both sides are hitting, and take the machinist ruler and just use this parallel edge, and it'll put the two squares on there for you. Got the little machinist ruler? You know, hold this here. Okay, we'll go to the other side. And that gives you that V, just like on a cardinal kit. Same thing. Send me one for Christmas.
So when they wear out, I still have one.
See, now this is a great thing that John Brodak could sell these shirts in dog years on the Nobler.
Put that on a wing.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have everybody here today. Peabody was here this morning. George, oh man. You can't even build a Nobler in peace and quiet, huh? Okay. This is coming out nice. This is day 6, right, Ken? 6 days, yeah.
6.
Actually, it's 5.5. We took a half a day off to see my mother.
Well, that was
As we're building this wing, look what comes in the mail. Look at this. Look at this. A picture of John Brodak and George Aldrich.
two criminals.
Look at this. Now, John, couldn't you at least put some long pants on when they took your picture? Here, look at this. Look at the knobby knees this guy had. What do you think of those knobby knees? Mary, let's have a woman's opinion. Knobby knees? Knobby knees. At least George got all dressed up. Oh, man. John, suntan lotion. Anyway, hey, congratulations on the cover. I'm going to pull that apart, and as Ken's here, we're going to get a frame and hang it over the shop. Then we can throw darts at it if this flame doesn't win the Nats. You cut this piece is just tacked in. Just cut this piece so the push rod is sticking out. Because you're going to need the wood at the back is where you want it. Up here you're going to have to cut it away anyway.
Sneaking up on that.
Sneaking up all right. We'll just put the slot in and... All right, we want to put those radius marks on it. Or you just want to do it with the Dremel tool? You just do it with the Dremel tool. This is the first layer of sheeting. The second one will just bring us parallel here. It should be nice and smooth. You get plenty of alphatic on there for the first layer. And plenty of time to let it dry. You just want to make sure you have that 16th gap now, and a 16th gap, so the next layer of sheeting, and obviously it would be a good idea to stagger the joints. Don't put the two joints, just like doing masonry work, don't put the two cement lines one on top of each other. Okay, now Ken has both of the sheetings on, and he just rough cut this. Now what you want to do is just gradually, very lightly taper that back, and then put that whole template in and get the radius in. And the reason for that is if you don't have that, you have a stress riser right in that corner, and you'll see, take your average stunt ship, hold the body, put the ring on the table, and press down. You'll see a little wrinkle in the tissue right at that point. And that's a very, very good way to get rid of it. Just trace them right in the corner. What we'll do is before you cut these, put another sanding drum on. In fact, you know a good way to do this is not with the cable one, you know, with the hand one.
Right.
Because it turns a lot slower. You get a little bit better control. That's a good way to do it. Now, one of the good tricks that we're trying to do, we have this great vacuum bench over here, but we can't really use it because the wing is basically attached to the table and we don't want to move it. So what we're going to do is we're going to grind these, but one of the things I can do because I'm here, I can hold a vacuum cleaner with the hose right next to where Ken is doing his grinding, and it sucks up all the dust, and you don't wind up with a big pile of dust that you're either breathing in, or in my case, because my wife has asthma, I can't really realistically do any sanding in the house or get any amount of dust around. This is a good choice. Now always take the hole that's just a little bit bigger than the Dremel, and then you can just feather it right in. Use the Dremel on a slow. By the way, if you ever went back to old Jim Silhavy or the Cipra Noblest, they had these beautiful, perfect, I remember that like it was yesterday. Hey, it was yesterday.
Yeah.
No, this really was a key thing that I always remember.
See, the vacuum just pulls the dust right off.
Now what's nice, when you take the ring and flip it over, what did you have, a couple of spots on the leading edge where you had to pinch it and set some glue in there?
Yeah,
Okay, one of the things you can do, if you really want to, you can take, because this is the top of the ring now, you can take a Q-tip and alphatic and just wipe it inside, make a little bead. You can do that. And what that does, it'll keep it from doing that when all the glue dries. You really can't do it with CA yet. You can get in here by the bell crank mount and be everywhere that the bell crank is near, put some little triangles, some glue seams in there. That's real nice. This is looking good. Oh man, perfect, Ken. You got the thing all glued back down on the table, and this is kind of self-explanatory. If it doesn't line right up, you can give it a little twist, throw a little ammonia on it. That's the whole key to everything, those little wood blocks. Harold Price, I hope you make it in the Hall of Fame this year. Hey, you deserve it. That was one of Harold's little tricks. Great little tip from Harold Price. Harold used to do this on all his planes. You get to this point where you want to lock everything in. And you don't want to have the top of the sheeting starting to look like that. So what you would do is take some alphatic, mix it with a little bit of water. That's plenty. You just go in the bathroom, put a little bit of water in there. What he would do is take, when the ring, before you put the last thing of sheeting, you go all around here, and it weighs absolutely nothing when you're done. But it really locks everything in nice, and it also stiffens up the wood. And if you want to see how stiff it makes it, take a piece of scrap, put some alphatic on there, and when you're done, try to put your fingernail through it. It really makes a little hard shell, much like CA does. So that's one of the things that right now, because we have all these joints exposed, just mix it up till it's like a water consistency. If you have a little paintbrush or a Q-tip, either one is fine.
it's a little thin.
That's fine. That's fine. Believe me, when that hardens up, it'll be like a rock.
Okay.
Just take a Q-tip and work your way right around there. And I would say most of all around the bell crank mount. I like the way that bell crank mount worked out. That was excellent.
Save the day there.
Okay, there you go. Just paint it in, baby. I like this a lot better than CA because what happens, CA gets brittle and hard. This doesn't. If you take aliphatic resin, a year after you do it, it's still rubbery. It's like epoxy. It never really gets glass hard like CA does. I think this is a good choice.
Never saw things going so bright. Noticing the day.
Well, that triangulating is working beautiful. Now, there's some little gaps up in here, just where you can slide maybe a piece of paper. If you take some alphatic, like Ken is doing, the alphatic will fill that. And the one thing you really don't want to do here is squeeze it. Do you know what I'm saying? Because that's when you get that dip in there that you try to block sand it out and you never can.
Yeah, you'll never have that real nice shiny leading edge.
Nope. And having that leading edge, it looks like a piece of glass. So important. Okay, we're looking for little gaps that they're not big enough to even worry about. Just let the aliphatic fill them in. Okay. You got the leading edge pinned in. Now what are you going to do? You're going to run some...
I ran a bead of hot stuff.
Okay, and you're going to press that back down with the block? Okay.
That's just long enough.
So that's the point. The wood that comes in the kit is just long enough. Now if, for instance, here's what you need to do. The reason the wood is not working the way you want it to, get a little ammonia and wet it here. It's not making, see the transition, the bend is very sharp here and it flattens out. What's happening is you're losing a little bit of the transition here. Just wipe a paper towel and some ammonia on that and the wood will get to be a 1/64 of an inch longer. Yeah, just want to, that's always a good idea. Oh yeah, that's nice. But even just a little bit, even water will be okay. Now don't spray it. Put it on a paper towel. Because you just need to wet this just the slightest little bit. See, it's just not coming up. It's a millionth of an inch too short.
I can use these. So we ran a bead down the inside of that.
Okay. Now, if you really had this problem another way, you could sheet the system. Just let the sheeting come up here just a little bit. See, that'll just let it lay down flatter a lot easier. And you don't have to wet the inside, just the outside.
Wendy's advice here, and
He never takes my advice. Don't let him lie to you.
well, I thought
You liar.
And what that did, I gained just a hair in the width of this wood, enough to make my D-tube come together here. So, hooray for these little tricks.
See, probably what happens is the wood is exactly 3 inches, and when they cut it, and then when you trim it, it's 95/100ths or something. Where if you didn't trim it, it wouldn't be straight in the leading edge, and that wouldn't happen. Not a problem. All right, let's just bend it down. We're in.
Well, first we'll put some aliphatic.
To give you an idea, we got 4 coats of PVA on what will be the rubber mold. Tonight I'll pour the rubber after we finish up here in the shop, and it'll be dry tomorrow. I like to let it sit 24 hours. That's coming out nice. Ken took the tail home over the weekend, then he put, how many coats of clear did you get on it?
I
got the dope starting to harden up anyway.
I got 4 coats of clear on all the fuselage pieces and on the horizontal tail surfaces. So.
Okay, and it's good to do that, like 1 coat in the morning, 1 at night, and let it dry, and do it outside, of course, if you can, but that'll get the wood hardened up and ready for the silk span covering when we get to that stuff. Now, as a little time saver on the bottom, what we did, we used 1/8 inch wood instead of 2 pieces of 1/16. And it went in about a third the time. Okay, same thing, you're going to Dremel out the radius, but on the bottom we used 1/8 inch, and possibly you could use 1/8 inch on the top also. A little help in doing this was you can lay out a piece of tape that just leaves the sheeting about a 1/16 of an inch, 1/64 over. We're trying to invent a lot of these little things that'll help you build the kit, and of course we're trying not to make it any more difficult to build. It's a relatively difficult plane to build. Make it easier and easier, and I think that's one of the things you can do to make it easier if you want to. If you want to go with the traditional way, of course, that's totally valid too, but it gives you a lot of options. Just like the fiberglass cowling. When you have the options and the choices, you do what's right for you and your program. Okay, we're at the end of, this is the end of day 6. Ken's already gone home and left me to clean up as he always does. Ken, you ever hear about the vacuum cleaner? Anyway, he made good progress today. You know, I want to emphasize over and over again, what we're trying to do is make very subtle little changes that suit our personal needs. These are not criticisms of the way the plane was originally designed. Obviously, it was an excellent, world-beating design. And we're not really trying to decide what's right or wrong. Things like this sheeting, I think, makes it a little bit easier for an average person to build instead of having to laminate the two pieces together. One of the things I would definitely suggest is if you're going to use the sheeting that comes in the kit, you might run into this. We had to add a little piece right here. It was just a little bit short and we really couldn't fudge it anymore. It might be worthwhile doing is get yourself you'd really need 4 pieces of 4-inch wide wood. Give yourself a little extra. That was tight, and it may just be this kit, because don't forget, commercially cut wood isn't cut with a micrometer, that's for sure. See, we really lucked out here. We just made it, but this one we didn't just make, so just keep that in mind. That's just one of the things might save you a little bit of, little ring jig is working out well. So far, so good. Anyway, the only thing left to do tonight is, I gotta look for the old, where I put it. Got the old cowl mold. The PVA is totally dry. I'm gonna mix up the rubber. It's a 10-to-1 part molding rubber. Polytech 7025 RTV. Pour it into the mold, and that's gotta sit 24 hours. I'll do that off camera, of course. Okay, see you tomorrow. Now check this out, John. You're on the wall of honor over here with the Polish wall of honor. Anyway, hey, I've been on 6 magazine covers, motorcycle racing and model aviation. I don't even remember the other ones, but they were all fun. It's always an honor, and again, congratulations to both of you guys. Hey, that's quite an honor. Check that out. You want to see cover shots, baby? Yes, cover shots. In fact, over here we have another cover and flying models. I don't even know what year that is. The big sweeper. Another cover shot. Now, believe it or not, this is me. Great Wendy Artnowski. Check that out. I'm telling you. What does that do on an oval video? Let me tell you. There's some newspaper covers I was on and whatever, bunch of baloney. What's the point? The point is, hey, congratulations, John. And I heard John tell me this. I don't know if it's true, that this was the first time George Aldrich was ever on the cover. Hey, congratulations to both of you guys. We're all famous.
Seven days on the road.
7 days in September. And in 7 days, he's getting ready to put the bottom cap strips on. Okay. Ready to trim the edges, cap strips on, and actually we have a day you really could go outside and sand this. Yeah. Get some of the sanding done.
It's a nice enough day. We should go fly it, but we need a little.
Now once those cap strips are on, now all the sheeting is on, that wing is pretty solid and should be pretty well locked in. Now, a good little tip, if you want to true up this angle at exactly 90 degrees, you know the wing is parallel to the table, so any sanding block that's got a 90-degree cut, you can true up the tips. Very easy. It's almost like having a machine shop. So to do the outboard tip, you can just roll the lead out. Just don't press on it too hard. You're going to have to cut this piece out, this piece of wood, and tuck the lead outs in. Just tuck them right in. You try not to, obviously not to kink them. If you decide you're going to use braided lead-outs, it'll probably be even easier. You can just flop them right in. But that takes care of that. Chop that little piece out, and you can block sand this side too. Capping's all done. This is basically ready to take outside and sand. 10 minutes from now, you'll be sanding.
Yeah, it's a good wing.
Okay. Now, one by one, you want to carefully pull the blocks, cut the CA off. Pull them straight out, nice and easy.
Once you build this wing, you're going to be careful with it. You can believe that.
It's a beautiful fall day to be sanding outside. Take plenty of sandpaper. You won't even have to blow the dust away.
It just falls out of the jig.
Excited? Does it look straight?
Yeah. Oh, this is a beauty. That's the straightest wing I've ever.
He'll drop it.
Yeah.
Get outside and sand it so I can make some cardinal kits here. Come on. When you actually sand the front of this, you'd like to see the same amount of sheeting on both sides of the leading edge. Yeah, that's pretty much ready to take outside, baby. You're all set.
If it doesn't rain, no problem.
Just pull it up. If you pull it up nice and slow, the contact cement will release it. You won't have to cut up another set of plans when you want to go make another plan. Alright, now we're done with the plans. We're done with what we need the jig and the wing for. We can scrape the table all back down. So we'll have it nice and flat. Now, when we work on the wing, when you bring it back in here, we don't need alignment, so we're going to put some pads up on the table, some blankets, so that the wing doesn't take a big beating. You know, every time you turn it over, it's going to hit the edge of the table.
A carpet pad or...
Carpet pad is good.
Pads work.
Bed egg crate pad, or old blankets. I have plenty of old blankets from the old days when I lived in a van, so it's no problem. But always get the table back down to be nice and clean. Blanket, and it'll protect it for all of the final sanding and carving up the tips. And the main thing is then you can take the blanket outside, fold the corners up, and just shake it outside. Remember, we're always very concerned here about the dust. I'm sure your wife will love you if you don't make dust in the house. All right, just spread that blanket out. And you can always double it over if you can, or if you want to, or can, or whatever. When you get back in from the sanding, it'll be all sitting here waiting for you. Let's see how Kenny's doing out here.
Sanding in the Garden of Eden.
Sanding. Now look, that is heaven on earth. You get to sand your wing. It's a beautiful fall day in the Garden of Eden here. Check it out. Coming out nice? See, here's what you want to do. When you're running that block, you want to make sure the back end of the block isn't hitting these ribs and you're whacking them down. You always watch the part of the block that you're not looking at. That's the one that... I haven't heard it. I was downstairs for a while. I didn't hear ping and... Oh, no! But I know how that feels. It's a nice assortment of sanding blocks.
Already picking up a lot of little areas that'll need attention later. Little nicks and
it's okay.
And this and that.
One of the things you don't want to do is sand a block on the leading edge and make the front all thin as paper. In fact, it looks like it's going to rain here.
It's raining a little bit now.
Well, what luck you have. A Hurricane Ken comes to New Jersey. Well, maybe I'll have to work in a garage.
this is one of those times and places where you have to have some patience. Because this is all going to get sanded a couple more times.
That's right. Well, the only thing I think you can do that's a problem is if you get the leading edge too thin and you start getting that deal like that. The trailing edge is 3/32, you don't have to really worry about that. You can blend that in real nice. And it's nice working out here. You don't even have to go... By the end of the day, you feel like Dizzy Gillespie. The stuff is up in your nose and your ears and your socks and everything. What's that? What's that I just heard? Oh, the fish are saying, hey!
They're thinking about becoming fly.
Don't get any sandy dust in my pond. I gotta breathe that stuff in, you know. Alright, Ken's got that rough sanded in. What I want to do right now, and we decided right at the beginning we were going to use solid wingtips to facilitate not having to have those little ribs to tissue, and that is a deviation from the original plane, but you know, we're not trying to make an exact copy. We're trying to make a plane that suits our needs and is a good demonstration model for John Brodak. Now, okay, you can just line that up there before you cut it. Make a paper pattern. How thick is that wingtip at the tip? Can you measure that? So you want to make this the traditional way, the way that we use on all the larger size stunt ships.
We're looking at an inch and an eighth.
Inch and an eighth, okay.
Right.
Now, as always, anytime you use a pattern, we're making one piece and then use that piece to trace the other three. That's the easiest way to do this. Now, the plans show a little tip weight box that's built in the rib itself, between the two rib bays. We're going to put our tip weight box out in the block. I also want to make it that a little screw will hold the tip weight down. This is the way typically we make bigger airplanes here in the shop, and trying to use that technology to our advantage since we've done it so many times. If you make the tip with all the little riblets and everything, one of the things you want to be concerned with is get as few wrinkles in the tissue when you cover this wingtip. And when you go to buff the plane, it's very difficult to get in there. Not undoable, certainly, but it's one of the considerations. The block tip, basically you just take the Gorham's polish and it's buffed. That's one of the advantages of having block tips. Oh, I honestly don't know if the original 51 or 52 Nobler, I'm not sure. I know if it had adjustable leadouts and tip weight adjustable, I don't know, but I certainly don't think there's any reason if you want to put these modern features in a plane that you should hold back. I don't know, and you'd have to really call George Orvich and get his feeling on that, but we want to have all the modern things that have been developed in the last, 10, 15 years, give us the best chance possible to make this a great demo model. You got the other one set?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what we want to do, we're going to join two of these blocks together to form the rough wingtip. We want to tack glue them together. What your best thing to do, Ken, is lay them on a flat piece of the table. Lay them flat down that way and then just tack them down. Pull up the rag on the table. Hold them flat. This way you get a nice 90 degree. Because we're going to use that joint in the block for our center line. I bet Jim Silhavy did this one. He said, "Oh, keep it a secret." I won't tell Billy Werwich how I did this, and Billy already knew. Hey, this is the way. All of those Cipra Noblers, oh my God, they had Silhavy's Nobler and the Tavio's Falcon. They all had those block wingtips. Okay. What we did, we weighed up all four of the blocks, took the two lightest ones for the inboard tip, the two heaviest ones for the outboard tip. We want to get the center line of this. You might want to draw the center line on there with a pen. Join it up with the center line on the wing, and then trace that airfoil shape on that side before we even tack glue it in place. And the easiest way to do this is just pin it. If you pin it, you know you're not going to have that where it's going to move around. Or if you have a helper, let him hold it in place while you do the tracing.
Give a girl helper on with that.
It's just pinned on. Now you can trace around there. get a nice line on there, and we can probably get a lot of this lopped off with the saw. If not, with a Zona saw, coping saw, anything, just get that off of there. Okay, there we go. And obviously the other one, we tuck the lead outs in. Just don't bend them. I tucked them in. You can hold the block right up on there, pin it in place, and do the tracing. This is all the material you can remove before you even tack glue it in. Now what I do, I just rough cut this, take some of that material off with a brand new number 26 blade, and that'll be ready to slap right in position. You just want to take as much as you can off before you tack glue it on. It's easy to work before it's tack glued on. It's just easier to handle it and not get it so beaten up.
Rough, very roughly roughed out, tack glued onto the end of the wing. Going to do the same thing on this side. And remember, we've protected our lead outs by turning them back into the wing. So we cut a little relief here to give those a place to live.
Now just make sure you have the center line on the wing and the center line on the rib lined up when you do this. Tack it in place first with a tack, and then tack glue it on with a couple drops of CA. You also want to make sure that when you tack glue this on, you don't have the wing where the tip is facing down or up or in some way, because we want to reference that center line. And of course if you're doing the built-up tips, you want to have that centerpiece in straight. You don't want to have it off, up, down, or whatever. This wing looks pretty decent, my boy. Now if you want to, one of the things you could do, Ken, is you can put some tape up on the wing.
Right.
Or in this case, you can just be careful that you don't start grinding away at the sheeting. If you're a little cautious, that's fine. You don't have to worry. We don't want to bring this down all the way right now. Just get it roughed out. Leave a 64th of an inch or so on there. So nice working out here. Boy, beautiful fall day. Leaves falling. Look at all these balls of chips full. Luckily these fish eat balls of chips, Ken, or you'd be in big trouble. Sanding, sanding, sanding. Keep that candy sanding real hard.
This is one of those funny places where you've got some options and some choices to make. And you can go for the option of duplicating the built-up kind of tip, which is pretty round. It drops off pretty rapidly at the ends. I want something a little different. I'm going for kind of a knife-shaped tip. I want something that thins out. So I'm shaping it to that option. It's something you should think about.
Like a cone head, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I like that. And we've already shaped the stabilizer and elevator to kind of have that same idea, that same shape.
One of the nicest things of all the old classic Nobles that I remember, Abe Sippers, Jerry Sippers, Sil Havey, all of them, they had those beautifully carved tip blocks, and the sun would just reflect off of that, and we'd all be kids standing around saying, boy, when I grow up, I'm making one of these puppies, and you can't stop me.
Now that we're grown up.
You know, at some point in time, you're going to want to spend X amount of time. X amount is a variable thing that you have to decide, really, how much of a time amount you would like to spend on the finish. And what Ken is doing now, and there's a couple. I remember we saw a couple.
One here. There's another one right here. That's a bad one.
We're detailing it. What happens when you actually block sand this out? You find out if the cap strip is low, if it's high, you block sand it down. If it's low, it's easier to cut it with a nice fresh razor and bring it up to the level of the sheeting. Otherwise, you wind up with a belly in the sheeting. And you got to decide that block of time that you're going to allocate to finishing it. Are you going to spend 10 hours, 15 hours, no hours? I mean, I've seen some moguls that I don't think the person that built it spent that much time doing the sanding, but that's a personal thing, personal choice. It's like trying to fit the nobler into your personal little amount of time that you want to spend on the finish. Now, in our case, we want to do a really nice finish. Hopefully, something that'll be very clean and neat, and we're looking for long life more than anything else. I don't want to have a plane that a week later there's oil inside the plane, or there's cracks in it, or it's not fuel-proof. Now, what is a bad thing to have happen? Just pull it up just enough, Ken. What's a bad thing is if you have a little high spot on the cap strip and it isn't blended in real nice. From wiping a plane off, you'll eventually put a microscopic tiny hole in there, and then, of course, oil winds up getting in there.
We're using a brand new X-Acto blade to cut these. We don't want to make a messy cut there. And we just glue this back. I'll go back and glue under this cap rib a little later, and then we'll dress that off and make sure we have it right.
Now, the trick is, another trick here, not to use any kicker. Just let the dust fill in the little gap.
We're about 30 brand new X-Acto blades into this project now.
30? About half of that box of blades is those. The now famous box of blades that's getting emptied, but if you don't empty out a box of at least 100 blades in the course of doing a project like this, you're cheating yourself. You're not getting the quality of woodwork that you could have otherwise. And by the way, those XL blades are working fine. In fact, this is an XL knife, isn't it?
Yeah. That's that
okay, John, let's plug XL knives. Here we go. Hey. And they work fine. Well, I normally don't like to spackle anything. I really don't like to get into spackling unless there's really a need for it. But we do have a couple of spots on the other side of the trailing edge where the joint is just not right. I don't want to fill it with glue. And this I would normally wait till everything is sanded with 320, which you may be finished today with the 320, I don't know. But get everything finalized, then we want to put a little bit of spackle in there. Flip that over so I can see the other side. And of course, we're in the middle of a hurricane here. Right here is what I'm talking about. Now, another trick is I've gone down this wing, every joint, and pressed, wherever there's a long skinny joint, press down to see that you're not making it so thin that the glue joint is broken. Then I've re-glued it and then sanded that back down, and that's why this one I noticed when I did that wasn't really as perfect as I like it to be. You could stick a little, when you're done, stick a little spackle right down in there. That'll be fine. Let that dry while you're working on the other side. Also, we chipped this up. That was, after this is glued on permanently, you can fill that with spackle too, or put a little wood plug in there. Anyways, the decision is you got to decide how much time you're willing to spend. Obviously, if time is not an issue and you're really trying for perfection, you just go back over it over and over 3 or 4 times. Also, radius and off the leading edge. Pick that straight up, Ken. Outboard tip, this is where it's right here. It's getting a little on the thin side. Let me see if you can see the shadow. Okay? Now, from sanding that, you know you don't want it any thinner than that. So when it gets thin, and if you're feeling, getting thin, put a little bit of thin CA on there and just wipe it with a paper towel. And it hardens it up enough that after that's tissued and painted, that'll be just fine. And you can sight down the leading edge is fine. What I did when Ken went to lunch, I went and took a bunch of thin CA, went along the front of the wing about 4 times, wiped it in, just to get that nice radius right along the front. Because that's where everybody tends to hold the plane, and they have rings and fingernails and everything. If it's going to take a beating, that's where it'll take a beating, right on the leading edge. Now, when a plane is in real wood like this, spackle is good for filling in little dings. A couple of things to remember. There's light spackle and heavy spackle. Light spackle does not work as good as heavy spackle. And if at all possible, what I like to use is a good old sheetrock compound. Either one of them, sand nice, paint seems to stick well, but you can't, they don't really add any strength. That's the problem. It's strictly a cosmetic thing like that green putty that you put in the paint. Yeah, any other dings that you see, don't do the one on the wingtip because we got to make the box there yet.
Well, after we put some dope on it, it'll work better.
Yeah. The sun will kick that off in 5 minutes and you can just dust it with it. Alright, I'm going to start with the inboard tip. This is just roughed out. Cut it off with a razor blade. Next step is just split it back apart, get a razor, slit it out, split it apart, and turn it into 2 clam shells, hollow it out with a knife, Dremel tool, whatever. And then I want to fit the little slider right in there. Next thing is to give us some reference lines, and I want to make this paper thin at this point in time. I want to give myself a little extra meat to work with. You know, back here it's going to be thin, so there's not really a whole lot you're going to be able to take out of there. Same thing up here, I leave a little extra material. Using my finger and the edge of the pen. This will just give me a little reference for my hollowing lines.
Same hollowing technique, go side to side, front to back. Now that's about all we're going to get done today, believe it or not. They went fast. We're probably going to end up just getting this tip hollowed, and that's about it before it's cleanup time. Nope.
Anyway, that's where we're going to end it today. We still have to do the outboard tip. Kenny's over there fooling with the inboard tip, trying to hollow it out, but I would count this as a good day. End of day 7. That wing is really starting to look nice. Really starting to look like an oval too. Nice and straight. Okay, that is not the heaviest Noble ring ever made either. It's really nice. You get that hollow? I gotta get the other piece.
Yeah.
Alright, that's about all we're gonna get done tonight, Ken. Let's clean up.
Here it is.
That one still has to be hollowed. We could dress that off with some paper.
Yeah, I'll do that by hand.
Okay. And that'll be ready. Get that little guide. Dig out the guide there. That's another thing. We get it ready. Get this all set up. Okay, believe it or not, it looks like the first attempt at making a nobler cowling mold. Successful, half successful, I'm not really sure. A couple of mistakes I did make, and I'll make the corrections, is when I laid this out, I didn't put a little bit of a draft angle. See, I've got some little rough stuff up here even. I'll trim that off with a razor blade. Hey, just so you can see that I'm making progress on this stuff anyway. Here's the plug, and you can see I got to dress off the plug now, and I'll hang on to it, just in case I have to make another mold. And I run a little test on this. In fact, I'll put the test on this on the other video. We're doing normal C5 videos here. I'll get the test on that. All right, we hope Kenny will be here tomorrow or the next day with all our tips ready to go. And here's the first prototype. We're going to let that cure overnight and come back to it tomorrow. First prototype mold from that little test mold that we made. Looks like it laid up real nice. Now that was our first prototype cow. And 15 minutes later I got another one of these laid up. I wanted to lay one up in yellow just to see. Assuming Ken is going to paint this this Nobler yellow, this will be a big help to him. We don't have to put 25 coats of paint on a cow. The cow can already have the color built right in. good. Guess that's our progress today, and we'll wait till Kenny gets back here tomorrow. Get started on those wingtips.
I got my trouble and woe.
Now just looking here, just think about all of the carving this saves and for how many people. And by the way, these are available direct from John Brodak. Make a direct order on them.
What makes the rain to fall? I'll never...
Okay, Kenny's back. Anyway, just another one of the cowls. I don't know which one we're going to use yet. We're making up plenty of prototypes. In fact, speaking of prototypes, we got another one over here. We also have a white one in the mold. I'm trying a little bit different technique here, making the edges a little thicker. We'll try that. Kenny was away. Now what, 2 days you took this home?
2 days.
Okay, so this is actually Friday. This is day...
I actually got one day to work on it. I had to make a living.
Just get a rough idea. You got the lead-out guide put together.
Right, I opened this up some more, sanded that thinner.
Okay.
Made up a lead-out guide.
Then that's pretty much ready to go in. Made a little tip weight box up with a little screw in it.
That's the Brodak tip weight box.
Okay.
This is one done by the Windy method.
Okay, so this plane will have 2 tip weight boxes.
Well, no.
Or no tip weight box.
I looked at this one, and this is not a workable...
You don't want to do it that way. Okay, so we'll do it this way.
Not a chance.
Okay.
Now everything...
Now, I don't really know how the original George Aldrich Nobler, if it even had a tip weight box, so I don't know that we're really inventing anything here. Okay, you got the flaps ready. Let's see what else. Just looking around here. This is, and he's got, what, 5 coats of clear dope on this?
Yeah, there are five coats of really thin clear dope.
Now, the idea of getting some dope on this as early as possible, lets the dope clear. The clear dope sit there, hardens up the wood, lets it dry out a little. I see you made the little fillet for this. It's ready to sand that, and that is one of the nice things.
We have to finish the fillet.
Okay.
Down the sides. That might not...
You might even need another coat in there.
Yeah,
it depends when you start. It's better to put it on in thin coats than thick coats. Okay. All right, looks like we're ready to rock and roll. I see you made a little wheel. And one of the things we're going to be doing is making some fiberglass wheel pants. This is a balsa plug.
I left those out last night.
Okay. Okay, plenty of stuff to do. Let's get rocking. The object of doing it this way, there's a real good object, is that what we want to have is a way of attaching the lead weights with a bolt so that they're bolted in. If you put a lead weight in here and the plane starts vibrating, it eats a hole right in the wingtip and it flies out and hits your mother-in-law. So one of the things we want to do is we use what I call, and I don't take credit for inventing this, I've just done it this way. In fact, I think Lou Dudko was the one that invented it, but I'm not sure. Having a little bolt in here to hold the weights. Now obviously you want to have between 3/4 and an ounce of weight, so if you make plywood parts, you don't hollow it out, it's just less lead you're going to wind up putting in there. So for right now, you got the little piece made, glue that piece in right, I would guess right about in the middle is fine.
632 with
yeah, you don't have to use a 440 bolt because, you know, who really cares? You're going to add lead to this.
That little pocket's been lined with thick CA.
Now, if for instance you were really intense and wanted to see every step of this, I don't want to make an all-day project out of making this tip weight box. I already have separate tapes on how to do this, but just having this idea in your mind is a good idea. This will give you some idea of what we're striving for. And the other object is to get the tip weight as far out in the wing as possible. You wouldn't want to have the tip weight any closer than it has to be. The further out it is, the less weight you'll need. And you can pretty much just for right now, tack glue it. Don't make it a final glue job.
Well, I don't think we even have to glue it. We want to...
Okay, now you want to mark where that bolt comes up. Just put a little pinch, and then you want to go hollow that piece out.
Right.
Hollow that piece out. Okay, you got this cap ready, right? Where's the other half of this? The other half of it. Okay, well, if you really want to be cute, the idea of what Ken is doing, if you were making a totally pro stunt plane, You would want to get the weight as far forward. This is a minor thing. To me, this is almost not even worth doing, but Kenny's a fanatic. Now what this would do is, this would allow you to get more of the weight forward to ensure that you wouldn't have a tail-heavy plane, since almost all planes ultimately need some kind of nose weight. What we did a little modification to the tip weight slider. I wanted to have these pieces a little more heavy duty. Yeah, obviously the choice is up to you whether you're looking to make a sport model or a total competition model. I think this is a good modification though. And we've got the tips totally hollowed out. Now I need to make a slot while Kenny's working on another tip. A little slot, the appropriate distance, and I'll go by the plans, so that the wires can come through here. Now this is the bottom shell, and what I want to do is carefully go in with a brand new number 26 blade and take out about a 1/16 of material here, so that the wires will have a slot that they can ride through for the whole length of the adjustment. You can see where that piece is removed. Now I can use this piece ultimately for a pattern. I want to make this piece out of 64th plywood and make a piece for both sides of this so that I'll have a nice hard edge when I go in there with an Allen wrench and Kenny slips and trips, he doesn't put a big gouge in my $1 million finish. Just a nice little detail touch if you can line all the hatches with either brass tubes or little pieces of 64th plywood. The piece of wood that we have gouged out, we want to make 2 of these. You can pretty much make them exactly the same. In fact, you can make them a little bit thinner if you want. I like 64th plywood if possible, the grain going the long way. Again, just a little detail touch. You could leave this step out, but if you want that extra little nice longevity, I call it. The first time you slip with that Allen wrench and put a big gouge in the finish, you'd be glad you spent 5 minutes doing this. I can just mirror image this slot right into the top piece and then glue those 2 pieces of plywood right in place. Got them made? Okay, good. There they are. Good. All right, now you just got to mirror image this slot, Ken. Put that slot in the same in the other side, and then we'll be able to join them together. Just got to remember to make sure that the slot is thick enough. Even after you have the plywood pieces glued on, the slot is thick enough that you can get a 440 Allen wrench in there. Yeah, that'll work. All right, just glue it in place. Okay, next thing is we're just going to glue the 2 clamshells together and make sure we have a nice straight notch. When your 2 clamshells together, you want to be laying on a flat surface. That's the whole key here. Because if not, if you do this, let me just show this. If you join it like this, ooh. So this gives you a reference that you won't get it in crooked. Line it up. If necessary, put 2 of those little blue pins in. That's always a good way to do it, those John Parthia pins. That'll take care of that. And then you can tack it, make sure it fits, and then permanently glue it. By the way, that slot looks just about nice. That's about how thick it would have to be. Now if you were to, for instance, glue this and all of a sudden it was off to one side, you could take a sanding block and you could get this and get it so it wasn't laying one way or another. Because picture what's going to happen. If this is on crooked, the readouts are going to bind, or if it's crooked this way. So you really want to make sure that's a nice 90-degree fit. And you want to do all the sanding on this while this is off the plane. And get the edge hardened up with CA and get this all blended in. Because once the wires are sticking out, it's going to make you crazy. You'll never get a nice finish on it. Sanding it right now without the lead outs there, you can get almost a full final sanding. Also, can get that whole edge, about 3 coats of thin CA, wipe it with a paper towel so you have a nice hard edge around the whole thing. We can blend this balsa wood into the wing, but it's going to be impossible. Once the lead outs are there, they're in the way all the time, whether they're braided or solid. With a nice edge hardened up with CA. While he's working on that, I wanted to show this, and this is on so many of my videos, and it takes almost the whole tape to make a tip weight box if you go step by step. When you line these two pieces up and tack glue them in position, what that does, and again, when you do this 1,000 zillion times, these are the little things you learn how to do quickly. That locates your box right in position, and you drill this hole and the hole in the plywood underneath all in one stroke of the pen. It should be that this piece is now your fixture for holding this piece in position. Then when you're all done, you can get a final sanding on that and a little tube around the bolt again so it doesn't pop out. And that is, for lack of a better word, a pro-stunt tip weight box. Now you just go over and over, put some thin CA on it, wipe it with a paper towel right away. Don't let the paper towel stick to it. Once you have the shape you want, whoop, and don't drop it. It hardens the edge up real nice. Again, the whole idea is once you get those wires coming out, oh man, is it extra work. When you do it this way once, you start wondering why you didn't do this forever. Anything you can do to make it easier to build a plank.
Things you should have thought of yourself. Things you should have thought of.
Having that edge hard, it's going to save you all the buffing, all the sanding, all the tissuing. If that edge isn't hard, you're going to have dings in it, hang your rash for all eternity. The last thing you want to do is just break that edge with the corner of a sanding block. If you have a paper thin edge, as soon as you dope it, it's going to twist and bend anyway. If it has a little radius on it, that finish will go in, and when this is all done, it'll look really nice. Final detail touches. And what I've seen a lot of people do, it's very common, is just they take this and glue it into the wingtip with CA. Some thin CA works down here, and then they, in effect, made permanent lead outs. So what I'm suggesting you do is leave these just a little bit loose, let them slide. Okay, this way if glue does get in there, you have a better chance of getting it moving around. And only glue the front and only glue the back. And then make sure right away you can move this. Make sure you haven't glued it in place permanently. Okay, now when we glue this in, we want to make sure the lead outs are coming straight out. If that little piece is in there crooked, what's going to happen is you're going to have binding at the tip. You don't want to make this with any binding at all. Okay, now we glued that in. Turn it over so I can see with two little braces, two little pieces of wood even helping it. And make sure it slides nice and free now, because if it doesn't, right now it's easier to fix. And that, the Allen wrench being in there, gives you a good reference when you tack glue it in. Just make sure that if that Allen wrench is going off 30 degrees, you know you're going to have a problem.
You're going to ginch this constantly.
Okay, that's ready. Just put them somewhere in the middle for now.
Yeah.
Just make them hand tight. So put the lead outs through and let's tack glue that on. That's ready to tack glue on.
Hey, that's progress.
Oh, actually, use the little pins to get it in place. This is not glued in. I just put a little spacer in there because I want that joint to line up with this joint. And when you hollow it, typically they get a little thinner. Now when you put that on, you want to clean that joint off to make a nice tight joint. Get it all lined up with pins, and then we'll get in there and take some of that material away and take that post out. Because typically when you take that material out, the tip will just a 64th of an inch, it'll collapse down because you've got a hollow block now. Okay, so first thing, pin that on, and then we'll tack through it and make sure we haven't lost that seam.
So I want to make a little piece of triangular wood I can slip in there to fill that gap. So I'm taking a piece of not bad 1/16 and putting a taper on it so we can slip it into that joint.
You're just making the equivalent of a little cork or a little plug. So we get the joint glued in time. This is something we probably put a nick in. It's good to fill it right now rather than try to fill it with spackle later. Tack glue it first. Make sure we're not missing anything. Put a couple drops. Just tack glue it. Hand, do this. Make sure you're not high or low. If you are, then you want to adjust this and make sure your two center lines in the front line up. Make a little plug like this, believe me, it doesn't have to be fancy. It It's just a little cork. Another little piece in there, then trim it all off and sand it. And that tip will be ready to sand. Yeah, that's a good little plug. That'll sand right back in. Now we want to sand the whole tip right in. Get the final sanding on that tip with a block.
This one's almost invisible already.
Good, I got in here with a 26 blade and just pulled that old material so it'll give me a little more travel back and forth, and at the same time took that little post that was holding us apart. You can see that joint is just about as perfect as a clam. That is really nice. Anyway, this is the end of this tape. We're at the end of this tape, and I don't want to start doing the outer tip and be in the middle of it, so we'll do the outer tip on the next tape. And I hope that the information you're getting from this is really useful, real-world information, not show and tell. This is the real McCoy. This is a real person, not a stuffed dummy.
Real person.
Well, we don't know. There's a lot of
Enjoying the
stuffing coming out of it.
Learning a lot.
By the way, that's sanded nice and smooth. Okay, we'll let Kenny final sand this out. In fact, we'll bend the lead outs on the next tape, too.
Yeah.
We need to do that also. Get the sandpaper. Get busy. And dress that off real nice. Don't be afraid to... Getting the wingtips right is so important. But when I used to look at, Jim Silhavy's Nobler, the one that's in John Davis's garage. Beautiful. Jerry Sipper's Nobler, all of these Noblers.
The Noblers of our dreams.
Yeah, well, the dream is coming true. Just keep sanding. See you on the next tape.
He went into the room where his sister lived. Paid a visit to his brother, and then he...
I don't know, that's about as straight as anyone I've ever built.
Come on, baby, take a chance with us.
Well, if you like the idea of doing a wood cowl, great. If you want one of these, all you have to do is just dial up John Brodak. We'll have them in stock by the time you get this tape. Coming up on the next tape, don't miss it. Flash Gordon returns.